Take a look at what happened.
Right ear footage shows him grimace and raise a hand to his right ear before ducking. Possible security lapses in focus after Trump injured in rally shooting. Donald Trump issues a fresh statement after assassination bid, appeals for national resilience. After shooting, he says it's more important than ever that we stand united. Thomas Matthew Crooks, a 20-year-old named by the FBI as the subject involved in the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, shot down. FBI says he was resident for Bethel Park of Pennsylvania. Prime Minister Modi becomes most followed world leader on X with over 100 million followers, says he's happy to be on this vibrant medium.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जजमेंट में ये बात कही गई है कि ये इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ विमेन है। ये इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ विमेन नहीं है, बल्कि हम महसूस करते हैं कि ये औरतों के लिए ये एक मुसीबत बन जाएगा।
India's All India Muslim Personal Law Board finds Apex Court's verdict on divorce alimony against religion, says will challenge the verdict in the Supreme Court next. Welcome viewers, early evening Saturday, that's early Sunday morning here. Donald Trump was shot at while giving a stump speech in Pennsylvania. The former president survived with the assailant's bullet grazing past his right ear. There's no danger to Trump's life, but the attempt on his life has sent politics of the United States into a tizzy. It's likely that an already polarized election might become even more toxic. There's an element of mystery behind the attack as well. Serious lapses in following security protocols have emerged. The fact that it came just a day before the Republican National Convention begins in Milwaukee. While Trump as Republican nominee was already a foregone conclusion, what it means for the Democrats is struggling with Biden's leadership amid a widely reported mental decline is a question that arises. Also, what it speaks of the preachy Uncle Sam, the same United States which pontificates on Arvind Kejriwal's arrest in India, expects supportive voices from around the world for its democracy in tatters. We'll discuss all that tonight, but let's look at the bare bones facts of what exactly happened in those moments when Trump was targeted by that 20-year-old Thomas Matthews Crooks.
Take a look at what happened.
Pennsylvania witnessed a deadly assassination attempt of former US President Donald Trump. Fortunately, the president had a narrow escape. While Trump was addressing his supporters in Butler, 7 bullets were suddenly fired at the podium. And one of the bullets grazed the right ear of the former president. As the deadly scene unfolded, Trump ducked and took cover behind the podium. And within no time, the Secret Service agents secured him by forming a human shield. There was panic at the venue as one of Trump's supporters was killed and 2 others were left injured. The sniper camp on the roof of the adjacent building then located the shooter and neutralized him. Unfazed at the assassination bid, Donald Trump pumped his fist in the air in show of strength and the crowd erupted in cheers. The former US president roared "Fight" as he was being guarded by the security officials. He was then whisked away to the hospital for treatment. Meanwhile, listen into these testimonies of eyewitnesses from the venue.
We're pointing at them. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police are like, huh, what? You know, like they didn't know what was going on. You know, we're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. You know, he's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
After availing treatment, Donald Trump was released from the hospital. He then headed to his private golf club in New Jersey, where the former president will spend his night taking rest. The FBI and US Secret Service are now investigating the incident further, while the motive remains shrouded in mystery.
The first thing I want to say is that the FBI stands with the people of Butler County in Western Pennsylvania, and our hearts go out to the victims of this heinous act which occurred today. This is our community, and I want to let the public know that the FBI has deployed a number of our resources, including investigative agents.
According to the White House, President Joe Biden, who is running against Trump, cut short his scheduled Delaware visit and was briefed on the incident. Biden also spoke to Trump hours after the shooting. With the US still reeling from the shocking attempt on Trump's life, the big question is, what's about to unfold on November 5?
All right, before we get that panel of guests, let's just get more details of what has actually transpired since the attack happened on Trump. In fact, world leaders have come out and condemned in one voice the assassination bid on the former US president. And there are larger questions still. The glaring security lapses that happened, point by point, you can see that between the Secret Service and the local police, they just failed to plug the gaps with the shooter taking that vantage from where he shot at the former president. Look at those lapses.
What happened?
The assassination attempt on Trump, who is seeking a second term in the country's highest office, has sent shockwaves across the globe. According to a report, the shooter was stationed barely 200 to 300 feet away from the rally area that was cordoned off. The report, quoting sources, said that the shooter, barely out of his teens, was on an elevated structure outside the cordoned off area, possibly a shed.
The bottom line is that the Trump rally was a rally that he should have been able to be conducted peacefully without any problem. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it. Everybody. I'll keep you informed, and if I am able to speak to Donald, I'll let you know that as well. But so far, it appears he's doing well, number one. Number two, that there's thoroughly investigating what happened to anyone else in the audience. We have some reports, but not final reports. And every agency in the federal government, I'm going back to my phone to speak with the federal agencies that are being put together again to give me an updated briefing. Has anything happened? They learned any more in the last couple hours.
The shooter, according to preliminary investigation, is believed to have fired from an AR-style rifle. A single bullet fired from an AR-style rifle is enough to blow apart a skull. There are questions how the shooter managed to get so close to the rally and discharge his firearm before being taken down. Was the venue of the rally and its immediate surroundings not sanitized for suspects as per standard security protocol? How did the shooter get a free shot at Trump despite such heavy security deployment at the venue? As the FBI and the US Secret Service carry forward the joint probe into the shocking assassination bid, it appears that the agencies themselves have a lot to answer for.
All right, now that we have the facts, we'll have a panel of guests joining us in a bit. There seems some connectivity issue. I can see some of those guests joining and getting disconnected, but I'm told Professor Mohsin Raza Khan, Professor of Politics, Professor of Practice in Political Science and International Relations, is joining us live from Delhi, as also Dr. Swasti Rao. And she's Europe and Eurasia Center expert, Europe Center. She's with the Europe Center of the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis. And in a bit, we are also going to have Major Gaurav Arya for a very Indian strategic perspective. But if I could begin with you, Prof. Dr. Swasti Rao, how do you see this development of Donald Trump being targeted in the manner that he was? It's sure going to put the American politics heading into election cycle into a bit more turmoil.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Good evening to you. And we all just got up with this very shocking news today on Sunday morning in India. Around, I think, 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, when we sort of learned that something like an assassination attempt has happened during a rally in Pennsylvania. And now, of course, we know more details about who that shooter was, how old he was, what kind of a weapon he used. But end of the day, you have to understand that it is a more complicated phenomena of why is there the culture of political violence so embedded in the state of America. And what has happened, in my opinion, has obviously raised certain questions on whether this particular embeddedness of this violent political culture is now making American state even more weakened and even more in a chaos than it already was. Because I don't think anybody can undermine the chaos that emerged from the two presidential candidates, talking, and one could see that Joe Biden almost could not even remember his own name. I mean, things had gotten back to that extent. So now when you have something like this, obviously I feel that the swing states perhaps would swing more in the favor of Trump. And I think he's also, if I'm not wrong, he's also called for unity, and he's also put up a very iconic figure in the sense of resistance, because right after he was shot, he got up and he got himself photographed. And I think that a photograph is quite a defining moment for the rest of the world. And very quickly, I also want to sort of pose a larger question and make this larger observation about what is going wrong with Western democracies. Okay, on the one hand, they seem so fond of, calling out against whatever they deem fit. I don't know what is the data that they use, what is the methodology they employ on what is happening in India. But at the same time, here is a country with 960 million eligible voters, 600 million, votes being cast amidst 1.5 billion people, and we don't have anything like this. Now, one can sort of still understand if it is a one-off event, right? And it is important because something similar happened in Japan when President Shinzo or Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was actually assassinated. Now, it is not in one-off. The problem is it is not a one-off incident in America. There has been a series of this kind of a political violence. I mean, this culture of political violence. And because I follow Europe, and I'm also intrigued about how I can draw certain similarities with the rise of right-wing and the kind of political chaos that led on the streets of Paris, for example. Chaos and emergency descended the streets of Paris. So I feel that we are at a stage where if they are interested in sort of learning how to conduct peaceful elections, they perhaps can look around, and India can be a good case study. Back to you.
A good sarcasm, Dr. Rao, but I think the point that you make about the rise of right, which somehow the traditional establishment in these Euro-Atlantic societies is not able to accept, digest, live with. Professor Mohsin Raza Khan, you think this is about hatred for Trump really coming out by way of that 20-year-old boy using that assault rifle and targeting him?
The interesting question is, what impact will this have on the elections? So I think it won't have a big impact, because we saw a similar assassination attempt with President Reagan in 1981. And there was a bump up, a 2-month bump that Reagan got out of it. But 2 months later, things had settled down and polling was back to where it was before the assassination attempt. So there'll be a slight bump for Donald Trump as well, but I think it won't last. And I think, again, the attention will shift to President Biden and whether he will continue or whether he will be replaced. Americans have had these kind of attempts in the past. It's maybe this generation hasn't seen it, but since the assassination attempt on Andrew Jackson, and then Lincoln, where it succeeded. In the case of Andrew Jackson, it didn't succeed. Then we have seen success in the case of John F. Kennedy and his brother as a candidate, Robert Kennedy. And we have seen failed attempts in the case of Gerald Ford, in the case of Reagan and many others. So the United States is not alien to this because of the gun culture there.
Absolutely right, Professor Khan. You're right that this is the U.S. political history is not alien to these kind of political targetings of the occupant of the highest office. In fact, the U.S. might have an unwanted distinction as a democracy of their presidents or presidential candidates getting targeted highest number of times. I think Donald Trump happens to be the 12th or 13th president/candidate getting targeted for an assassination bid. And it does not seem like a very welcome distinction for a democracy, but unfortunately that seems to be happening so often. Major Gaurav Varya, you think that this is happening because it's so easy to procure an assault rifle in the United States, or there are deeper reasons? But first up, about the assault rifle thing, a 20-year-old boy getting an assault rifle just fresh out of high school, getting an assault rifle so easily. We'll go into the lapses later, but the fact that a 20-year-old boy has an assault rifle with which he can target a former president of the United States speaks volumes about the society, in fact.
Thank you for inviting me, Abhishek. It is not just about a 20-year-old getting an assault rifle. There are certain states in the southern part of the United States of America where you can order an assault rifle online. They'll deliver it to your home. There are people there. If you go on YouTube, there are videos there. You'll see people who have tanks, who have anti-aircraft guns. So assault rifle is a very, very small thing. It's in India, we think it's an assault rifle because here, there are no weapons. You can't see weapons apart from very archaic and old weapons out in the street. But in America, it's pretty common, especially the southern states. I mean, assault rifles. My point is not whether he got an assault rifle or not. My point is that in spite of the Secret Service, how did he get less than 150 yards, which is nothing, 150 yards, and they knew that this place where they were having this, function with Donald Trump, there were buildings, there were abandoned factory buildings there. There were buildings in which the work was not being done, and in the sense that there was no workers. There were buildings that were unoccupied at that point in time, and apparently, I just read it somewhere in some news platform that somebody actually warned the police that there is an active shooter on the roof. Before that guy pulled the trigger. So clearly a lapse on the part of the Secret Service also, because Secret Service is the be-all and end-all of VIP protection in the world. They should have occupied all the roofs, and they should have had, drones and choppers up in the sky. I don't know why they didn't see. And it's not like he fired from 1 kilometer. It's not like he fired from 150 yards or less.
Absolutely.
Which is nothing.
In fact, Major, we just a while back ran the package on what were the lapses, and interesting. I, in fact, noted them down as we saw those coming out in those pictures. The presence of the assailant, crooks, was missed by the security on their own. Remember when the protectees to come at the venue. Before that, the security apparatus is in a state of high alert. And there is a security sweep that's going on in real time when the protectee comes. And so they did not see or notice crooks on their own. That's number one. So what kind of pre-event sweep was carried out, for example? Then the vantage point of the warehouse, it was left unguarded, unattended. Now, typically, as it happens, this is absolutely poor application of security mind there while you are carrying out that what is called the advanced security liaison, right? And I would want General Kulkarni to come in on this as I narrate these lapses that happened. The shooter was, in fact, forget about these lapses beforehand, before the protectee, in this case Donald Trump, comes in. The shooter was spotted by some of the participants in the rally, and it was flagged to the cops present there, the local police perhaps, if not the Secret Service. And yet no action happened. General Kulkarni, you get an idea that this is preposterous, absolutely unbelievable.
Absolutely. There's no denying apart, but a society which is totally polarized. It's amazing. Almost something what you find now in our own country. A polarized society where there's hatred, violence, there is no opposition, there is nothing like this thing. It's all enmity. The kind of language being used, the values that are there, it's a very different setup. And in that context, this lone wolf, if he's a lone wolf because he's already shot dead, or he's a part of a bigger gang, or he's a part of a narrative which is already there, like Gaurav rightly said, you can't get someone so close as 150 yards. The fact that he has been escorted, like you rightly said, the police was also reported, not bothered to even look into it, what was going on. And the first shot he fired, and consequently about 8 odd rounds that he fired, then he shot at, indicated that how close, first, the security lapse, second, a polarized society that didn't care, third, Trump has lots of enemies. There's no denying the fact. Trump is a factor which is seen as something, an opponent in the United States or anywhere in a democracy. Look at our democracy, the world's largest democracy and the world's oldest democracy. A survey is conducted, and when it comes to governance, what is the kind of percentage which is with the government? Just about 25% people like democracy when it comes to governance in the United States of America. And when it comes to India, it's almost 70%. So there's a lot. The security lapse is definitely there. That's because of Trump is being seen as an enemy. He's seen as a threat to democracy. Constitution under threat. Democracy under threat. The kind of language, the kind of relationship, family values gone down. And the gun culture in America, you can get, like Gaurav said, anywhere. You can get a weapon online. That is not a problem at all. And again, the divide between the society. So these kind of things, drugs that are playing a big, huge role. The money being funded to people all around. Unemployment that is over there. So all these factors are playing a huge role. And ideologically, people can be swayed. 20-year-old boy, his crooks has become a real big crook. At this age, he's a crook. So you can well imagine what kind of a person is he. So that's just the kind of society that one is in. So one has to be very, very careful, and it's a lesson learned for all of us. Thank God Trump is safe. I would put it that way, and I'm sure he's healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. General Kulkarni, in fact, I have to introduce two more guests that we have on the panel, Professor Madhav Nalapat and Pathikit Pine, both domain experts of international relations and security and strategic affairs. And if I could get in Professor Nalapat first. Professor Nalapat, we have been discussing about the security lapses, but I think it's beyond that. It's no happenstance that tomorrow the Republican National Convention is starting in Milwaukee, a traditionally Democrat city. And just a day before that, this attack on Trump happens. Somebody is sending a message somewhere, right?
Well, the shooter would definitely have known that the RNC is meeting and that Trump would be nominated. So he'd be one of maybe more than 100 million or even more Americans who know that. So there have been terrible security lapses, and there has been a very vituperative atmosphere created, especially against Donald Trump. Sorry to say, President Biden said he's, in the bullseye or things like words to that effect. And these are words that one should never use because they're used in connection with shooting. So, but the point is very simple. And the main point is, politically, I think Trump is going to be very difficult to beat after this particular event. He was already difficult to beat, definitely impossible for Biden to meet, but today it's impossible for Biden to defeat, definitely, but it's also becoming very difficult for any other Democratic challenger to defeat, because he has shown an example of courage under fire. And very importantly, as soon as the bullet grazed his ear, he ducked. The Secret Service should have pushed him down. They didn't. Trump himself ducked, and that saved his life. I think 2 or 3 more rounds turned up. And frankly, 2 people were killed by rounds going astray. And, if he had not ducked spontaneously, well, the Secret Service, pushed him down after he was already down. Let's put it that way. And that is very unfortunate. I don't think there's any conspiracy or anything behind it. It's just pure carelessness and possibly shock. But Secret Service agents in a security detail dealing with an ex-president are not supposed to be shocked. They're supposed to react properly. But having said that, I think this is now Trump's election, and I find it's going to be very difficult for the Democrats to beat him. As for Joe Biden, every day everybody is going to ask, you yourself said that this is absolutely unacceptable. Yes, but how did it happen? You yourself said it should never happen. Yes, how did it happen? It happened under your watch. So frankly, I think Joe Biden is now electoral toast where Donald Trump is concerned. If the Democrats ever nominate him or keep him in there as a standard bearer, he is going to fight a battle that is lost from today.
Professor Nalapat, you are absolutely right. You have to give it to Donald Trump that he was courage under fire, a picture of courage under fire. And there was, in fact, this additional security lapse, I would say, that when the president is attacked, he is ducking. The nearest Secret Service agent is at least 5 to 7 meters away. It does not happen. You have to, what is close proximity protection? If you are at least 5 to 7 meters away in a situation like this. So obviously there are multiple security lapses, and this happens to be one of them. But, for a 20-year-old to be motivated enough to pick up a gun and shoot at a former president just ahead of the RNC is symptomatic of the kind of hate that's there for Trump. And before I go back to Swasti Rao and get in Pathikit Pine, I have in fact compiled the number of abuses that were being hurled on Donald Trump over the last, say, 5-6 months or more. The manner in which he has been called a dictator compared with Hitler, Mussolini, and the way it is said so often on national TV in the United States that if Trump comes back, he would be compromising democracy. Let's look at that compilation of abuse on Trump. Then I come back to this conversation. All my guests, please stay back in just 2 minutes.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Various labels and accusations have time and again been leveled at the former US president.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said, if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face.
They said he does not abide by democratic ideals. They even compared him to tyrants like Mussolini and Hitler.
A lot of people have tried to draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler and the use of the terminology like vermin and the drive that those men had towards autocracy and and dictatorship. The difference, though, I think makes Donald Trump even more dangerous, and that is he has no philosophy he believes in. He is not trying to expand the boundaries of the United States of America. He's not trying to overcome a neighboring country like Putin is in Ukraine. He is not going for some grandiose scheme of international dominance. All he wants is to look in the mirror and see a guy who's president.
Is this rhetoric exactly what led to the failed assassination bid? As the nation navigates this situation, one question looms large. For how long will the common man ignore the far-reaching consequences held by rhetoric?
Right, Sastri Rao, you would have heard some of those comments of American politicians at the very senior level. Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker, then former Senator Claire McCaskill, among others. They're saying he's enemy of the state. They're saying he's worse than Hitler and Mussolini. They're saying he's more dangerous. So obviously, all this contributed to an echo chamber where a young, out of high school boy like Thomas Matthew Crooks thought that let's eliminate Trump before he becomes the presidential candidate of the Republican Party in Milwaukee.
Yes, it is indeed dangerous because I see a rise of an intolerance that America criticizes in the rest of the countries all over the world. Let me not get into the very obvious fact of how the procedural democracy indices are very high in the US. We are not talking about that. And nobody here is so naive to not understand that what happened today in terms of the assassination attempt is not the same as saying that America cannot hold free or fair elections. So we are not drawing a false equivalence when we are saying that America, what happened today would have an implication on undermining the essence and ethos of a democratic America. Okay, it is not procedural. I'm talking about something which is more substantive, and I'm trying to make a very, I would say, a subtle point here. I mean, I don't think anybody here has forgotten what happened right after the attack, the Hamas attack on Israel, the way anti-Semitism was on a rise. I would not say on a rise, on a surge, on a whirlpool in all these Ivy League American universities. I'm sure nobody here has forgotten how the presidents of Harvard University, Pennsylvania University, and MIT, the three most prominent that I can remember, they've been facing questions from the Congress about why and how they've been so, I would say, why have they allowed this kind of a, very violent response to whatever they think is not okay in their larger scheme of belief, whatever that may be, if it is a liberal order, if it is an identitarian order, whatever the hell it may be. But the point is that why has America and these beacons of knowledge that the US has, right? Why have they systematically allowed for this kind of a mental violence to take root? And now I want to connect it to what you were just saying about this 20-year-old boy. Obviously, he's not a jihadi. Obviously, he did not do a mujahideen, act out there. I'm sure Major Gaurav would talk about that more. So obviously, it's not that. But we see that the American society, and you see a lot of them, they've been pushed to a point where if they see that there is a different kind of a politics happening, they want to subvert all possible political and democratic institutions of the state and perhaps just kill them outright. So this is a wake-up call of where America is affecting or hollowing out its own youth and everything else. The gun culture, lapse, security lapse, no security lapse, those are all very secondary and tertiary factors. End of the day, I mean, what kind of an American society are we looking at? And like I said, this is not an isolation. To me, this is very much the same kind of echo chamber that I saw at the time of these, this very, I would say, very violent form of wokeism actually being manifested again and again in American society. So I would perhaps connect these two and would be very worried about them.
Right. In fact, I wanted to understand the implications for India, and for that I'll come to Pathikrit and Professor Madhav Nalapat in a bit. But since we have two more guests joining in from the United States, Dr. Joseph Chalil, he's author and publisher of Universal News Network. He's joining us live from Florida. And Adel Nazrian, she's Senior Fellow of the Gold Institute of for International Strategy, and she's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Adel, how's this mood like in D.C.? I mean, this is very serious, and this casts that this really takes away from the Democrats and the left this whole moral high ground of not being violent. I think this is going to have consequences for the elections in the United States.
Oh, it absolutely will have consequences for the elections in the United States. I think if you were to ask me a week ago, a year ago, a month ago, even a few days ago, if Donald Trump is going to win the election in November, I'd still tell you I'm on the fence. I don't think he has necessarily what it takes to pull it off. But after yesterday, what was pulled off, I think he's going to be in a much stronger lead and has a much higher chance of winning it come November. And the mood in Washington, D.C., the mood in the U.S., to just answer your question is, D.C. is not a very Trump-friendly, state. There's a lot of, progressives there, and it just, all the coastal towns, Washington, D.C., New York City, Los Angeles, California, it tends to have a little more of a political left-leaning bent ideologically. So they're actually, some of them are floating conspiracy theories around. Some of them are actually coming out and saying, I predict Trump's going to lose, Pennsylvania by 1 point. And a lot of them are just kind of keeping their mouths shut and putting out very, very, very politically correct diplomatic responses and saying, we wish Trump a full recovery. But I think if they really had their druthers about them, they'd probably say, oh, we wish the shooter wouldn't have missed. That's the kind of sentiment that I'm kind of seeing from people in Washington, D.C., of course.
Right. Isn't that really unfortunate? In fact, let me get in Joseph Chalil. Joseph Chalil, Professor Nalapat earlier made a comment that this really paves the way for Donald Trump to become the 47th president of the United States. There is no stopping him. From Pennsylvania to the Pennsylvania Avenue, the road is cleared now. So you think that's the sense there on the ground in the United States?
I would say, again, America was very lucky yesterday. I think, again, Trump and the party, again, was really blessed, saving his life by just 1 centimeter difference. I was watching it live, seeing how what's happening over there. And, maybe it could be just a whiff of air because, again, it's a sniper rifle from a football field away by a young guy, maybe with military training or not. We will never know until now. But again, and the timing of it, to be on the last day or the last rally before he takes over as the presidential nominee, once he becomes a presidential nominee, his protection, his Secret Service protection will be equivalent to that of President Biden. So this wouldn't have been possible. So just to have that choice of the location, for him to have access to this rooftop 1 football field away, and Trump, I think, again, God's grace was saved. And of course, there are 1 fatality, and I was told there's 2 critically wounded attendees of the rally. But his success is now, I can definitely say, guaranteed.
Right.
There is no way, even Democrats who are calling for Biden to step down, at this point, they've stopped it because at this point, they're asking, what's the purpose of stepping down? Even if they bring in Gavin Newsom, if they bring in somebody else, I don't think any of them will have any choice. Even if they put Kamala Harris, there'll be no way Trump will now lose.
There's no stopping Trump. Pathikit Pine, in a way, this is very familiar. The manner in which we saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi getting abused in India, not just during the campaign, but even earlier. In fact, going as far back as 2013, remember those bomb blasts that took place in his Patna rally where 6 participants lost their life, and there was in fact a bomb right under the stage from where Prime Minister spoke at the rally. So this culture of abuse, creating an echo chamber where someone gets motivated with an assault rifle. In other cases, someone gets motivated, or a group gets motivated with bombs. I think this is about the political culture. We are familiar, and the United States democracy as it is also taking the same route.
Well, Abhishek, they're getting the taste of something that they have outsourced and sold to the rest of the world for a long time. The wokeism which is affecting us is actually emanating from that place. let me tell you what the leftist and this urban Maoist culture do. They actually dehumanize their opposition to that extent that they justify violence. They can justify anything. That is the level that they vilify. They do it to your opponent. And probably in India, had Prime Minister Modi got 400 seats, we know what was being planned out. But I'm not surprised with what has happened in the United States, where kids go to school wearing good bulletproof jackets because they never know where another 20-year-old guy would come and shoot them. Why are we surprised with this? Now look at the hypocrisy of the so-called liberals. They would prefer a person as a president who is living in a completely different delusional world. With all due respect to his age, he waves hand with a different kind of a dimensional world. He does all kinds of things which normal human beings cannot understand. And at the same time, you see a presidential candidate being assassinated almost. And why do we call it carelessness? I mean, the Secret Service could not identify the guy when he was roaming around, when people were identifying. The moment the shot was fired, he was shot dead. He was no attempt. I would rather ask, was any attempt made to immobilize him so that the trail can be brought out? And then the report suddenly comes, oh, you know, he's a Republican voter registered. That means this is a classic case of plausible deniability being created beforehand. So I'm not surprised, because for a long period of time, you know, the Democrats said that we are the ones who are peace-loving, but for the sake of peace during the Obama era, look at the number of countries destroyed, from Syria to Libya, from what was done to Afghanistan to Iraq. And now the so-called liberal Democrats in power, what is happening in Middle East, what is happening in the Ukraine war. And here was a Trump, which according to them would have destroyed Constitution, the same narrative that was created in India against Prime Minister Modi. And during the Trump era was the only time when United States was not in a full-fledged war against any other country. Let me tell you, anybody in United States who is against conflict is an enemy of the state de facto. Whether he is President Trump or somebody else who says that this is not an era of war, because the military-industrial complex cannot survive unless and until the wars continue, Abhishek. So I'm not surprised of this kind of culture which has, permeated down into America, where mentally, if not physically, they are at a state of civil war.
Oh, that's a fantastic argument you have brought in, Pathakrit, in fact, and I wonder why I missed it, but thanks for bringing it in. The fact that Donald Trump is very vocally not pro-Ukraine, the fact that he is not very enthused about NATO, the fact that he is not as harshly anti-Putin as most of the Western capitals and the leaders there are. And on that, if I could get in Swasti Rao, because Swasti closely tracks Europe. Swasti, you think, I mean, this is a conspiracy theory, obviously, but then essentially a message being sent that any administration that comes after November can't be or shouldn't be soft on Putin or harsh on Ukraine.
Well, I mean, by whatever metrics I know and whatever knowledge I have and whatever I can think in terms of following this region for a while, I think this is a very far-fetched idea, because I'm glad you started out with this thing, calling it a allegedly conspiracy kind of thinking. I mean, we as scholars would never rule out anything until and unless we get absolute validation for or against it. However, in my opinion, see, even the support, even Ukraine and the relation with Trump is not really understood very well, because a lot of people perhaps miss the point that it was actually Trump administration who really started militarizing Zelensky's, Ukraine before Biden became president. So this is a particular, if you talk to the Ukrainians, for example, of course they would want somebody like Biden to be there, because Biden is obviously much more, pro-NATO and pro-Europe and all that merging of the two security theaters, etc., etc. But at the same time, there is also a thinking within Ukraine that says that, yes, there is going to be uncertainty, but at the same time, let's not forget that it was also, it was the Trump administration who actually started all that militarization in the first place. The training, the CIA-led trainings, where all the, other Western powers had joined hands, etc. The effect of which you probably see today. So that's one part. The other part is that that still remains looms in uncertainty. Yeah. The other thing that you see happening in these countries is they are trying to do what is now referred to as Trump proofing. So they are trying to Trump proof NATO as well as European security. The question is, will they run out of time till the time they really are able to do something tangible in that?
And Swasti Rao, since we are discussing conspiracy theories, quick comment from Joseph Chalil, before I go to Professor Nalapat. Joseph Chalil, as I said, we are discussing conspiracy theories. Since Trump juggernaut was not stopping and the Democrats were at their wits' ends because Joe Biden is at his wits' ends and is in a state of mental decline. So did the deep state sort of create this so that they can tell Joe Biden, now it's even more difficult for the Democrats to win, so please make way for somebody who can at least pose a challenge to Trump?
They tried everything to stop Trump. They tried to sue him, to put him in jail. They tried to make him, he's a convicted felon. They tried to stop him from running. Then even after everything, the truth came out regarding Biden's, decline in mental status and all these gaffes in the recent things. I think that the time was out for them. There's one thing which, some of us brought up, is that there is wokeism now coming into Secret Service.
Okay.
So, the new director of Secret Service was very interested in creating quotas, especially for women, for other, sexes into Secret Service. That was her pet project. So, and then not, keeping the quality. So reducing standards, in the Secret Service, to increase the quotas for gays, lesbians, and women. Is that the right way to protect your president? Standard operating protocol calls for 6 counter snipers in every rallies like this. I was told there was only 2. So was it that Trump was denied access to drones and additional counter sniper personnel and Secret Service agents to cover such event?
That's another conspiracy theory, in fact, that additional security measures were sought by the Trump campaign and those were denied by the administration. But, this whole democracy debate, Professor Madhav Nalapat, I'm moving on. You see, flip this episode a bit. Instead of United States, imagine this is Dhaka in Bangladesh. And an assassination attempt has happened on Begum Khalida Zia. What would be the position of the State Department spokesperson of the United States? Professor Madhav Nalapat, Uncle Sam, don't preach. I think that seems to be the message coming out of this. When you pontificate on the arrest of Arvind Kejriwal or the disqualification of Rahul Gandhi, there has to be some line drawn somewhere, right, Professor Nalapat?
Well, look, I'd like to say, Abhishek, that I don't believe in any of these conspiracy theories. But the fact is, the majority of the American electorate is going to believe in them, given the circumstances in which Donald Trump was almost killed. So any conspiracy theory, no matter how wild, will be believed. And of course, you have seasoned analysts such as Tucker Carlson, who warned in advance that there's going to be an assassination attempt. Yeah. But the fact is that I'm not going to go into that. The fact is, at least from 2017 onwards, he may have started arming Ukraine and all that, that's fine. From 2017 onward, Donald Trump understood we are in Cold War 2.0. The adversary is China, not Russia. And that just as, China was brought into the US camp during Cold War 1.0, Russia needs to be somehow brought into the US camp and to the Democratic Party camp, by the way. It's also the India camp. It's also the Quad camp. During Cold War 2.0. So he realized that. And so did Prime Minister Modi. Both as Chief Minister and as Prime Minister, by the grace of God, Prime Minister Modi has gone through several such attempts. And the reason is the same. The inflammatory rhetoric against him, as it was against Donald Trump. Totally inflammatory, totally one-sided, totally hateful, by the same people who are saying, oh my God, hate is very bad. We shouldn't have hate. And then they're spouting this about Donald Trump or Prime Minister Modi. So there's no doubt about that. Yeah. I'd like to just say, Shinzo Abe, he knew what China threat was. He was assassinated. You had Fico, who frankly did not follow the European Union line on several issues in Slovakia. He was sought to be assassinated. And you had Trump, who was sought to be assassinated, who again does not want to follow the standard EU or the Atlanticist line, and who really wants to focus on the new threat, which is China. So the common link between all these leaders is actually focus on the real new threat, rather than keep harping back to a threat that's over and done with in 1991. And this threat has begun in the 21st century. And for nearly 15 years, Abhishek, guess who was providing huge amounts of technology to China for them to weaponize against the United States, against Taiwan, against South Korea, against Japan? The very countries that I'm naming are the people who armed and equipped China even during this 21st century. So I can only say, Abhishek, that Donald Trump or Prime Minister Modi or Shinzo Abe, I mean, they had one thing very clear in mind. The threat is China. Don't be diverted into Russia or Europe. The threat is in Asia. It's a threat of control of the Indo-Pacific and the Eurasian continent. I think that's the important point that we can't miss. That, in my view, is a common link binding all these individuals who have been frankly assassinated.
Professor Nalapat, absolutely, but since you say that it's a given now that Trump is going to win the elections later this year, I have a factoid brought into my notice by a young boy on our output team, Arth, according to which, twice it has happened that candidates who faced an assassination attempt, Theodore Roosevelt in 1912 and Gerald Ford in 1975-76, in fact, 2 assassination bids on him, both lost. So it's not necessary that an assassination attempt guarantees that you're going to win election. Adil, you think that kind of thinking would be the fancy of the Democrats in Washington, D.C. today?
No, Abhishek. So Donald Trump is an entirely different kettle of fish, from the individuals that you mentioned. I mean, they're very different kettle of fish. United States is very different from what it was then. And I can tell you, in my reckoning, yes, this is going to supercharge the Trump campaign, and it's going to supercharge his popularity and his acceptability. Not just the fact that he escaped assassination, but the bravery he showed under fire. The courage he showed. He himself has been gone now, and then he showed extraordinary bravery under fire. And we have a senior military analyst here. He knows what bravery under fire is. Well, Trump showed that. And I think American voters will respond.
Professor Nalapat. Quickly, Adil, you think that this opens a window of opportunity for the Democrats to change their presidential candidate? Remember, their convention is happening in August, so they still have some time, a month before, in which they can actually think of replacing Biden with somebody else?
Yeah, I think that they definitely, I want to address the last question too after this, but basically they have a choice to replace Biden. They could replace him with Kamala Harris, although I think she'll get clobbered in a general election against Trump. You have Gavin Newsom, who definitely looks the part, but I know him personally. Look, he's a smart guy, but he just is he's way too much, doesn't have a backbone when it comes to doing what's best for the country. He was more concerned with what's popular for his voting, and won't do the right thing. I don't think they have enough time to switch candidates. It's just way too long. They may end up just sticking to President Biden and trying to, Soros wants to stick to Biden, and that's what they're going to do. I just want to point something out.
Another conspiracy theory you bring in, Adil, of Soros in the picture. But let me. I am running out of time. Major Gaurav Arya, last word to you. When we were growing up as teenagers in 1990s, maybe you were a little ahead of us. We would be impressed with those pictures of a young Bill Clinton or a younger Tony Blair vis-a-vis our own gerontocracy of, Inder Kumar Gujral, pouting P.V. Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee with his knee problems. And now you look at the picture. You have a gerontocracy like Joe Biden and Donald Trump effectively, and the Americans have no other options on both the sides.
No, absolutely, Abhishek. When Trump calls Joe Biden old, it's a little bit rich, because Trump is not that young either. He's just 3 or 4 years younger. But anyway, having said that, thank God he's safe. And you see, this is certainly a civilian, because no soldier will miss at 130 yards. I mean, you have an AR 130 yards and this guy goes for a headshot.
Yeah.
He must be absolutely crazy. He's not a soldier, because a soldier would have certainly got the target. But having said that, thank God he's safe. But certainly it will give it will give a lot of sympathy to Trump, because Trump already has it. It's going to build on that.
Abhishek, can I add one last point that I think is very important to note here?
Quickly, Adele, I've run out of time. Quickly, 10 seconds.
Hey, Democrats in the Homeland Security Committee introduced legislation called the Disgraced Former Presidents Act recently that would strip Trump of his Secret Service protection because he was convicted in District Attorney Alvin Bragg's kangaroo court. Imagine that. If he becomes president, the Democrats are trying to strip him of Secret Service protection. This happened before, just before this assassination attempt.
Yeah.
This is what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, obviously, there are so many theories there, but I have run out of time. Notice the United States, as the strongest democracy, needs to present a better picture for the rest of the world to still continue to respect them. It's unfortunate, the events of the last 24 hours, and hope the US picks up the threads from here and does better. On that note, thank you so much, friends.